Welcome to KRA's The Hub, the official podcast of KRA Corporation. And now get ready to hear workforce topics and trends you need to know on the go.
Hello and welcome back to the program. This is Doug Foresta. I'll be your moderator for today. Today we continue our series celebrating women in workforce. Today with me is Carrie Amann. She's the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Workforce Development Association. Carrie, welcome. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here today.
Thank you. So I'm looking forward to getting into talking about your leader, and we'll talk about some other things. But before we do that, could you just say a little bit about, I introduced you as the Executive Director of Pennsylvania Workforce Development Association. Tell us a little bit about the association and a little bit about your role.
Sure. The Pennsylvania Workforce Development Association, we're a little more than 40 years old. We are your industry association that started out in the mid to late 1980s, really bringing people together to foster an understanding of what works well to help people find employment and to help employers find talent. And so we've stayed true to that mission over the last 40 years, though, as most people that might be listening understand, with different federal laws, different state leadership, you have to ebb and flow with the times of policy and politics and leadership. And so at the association, we are a member-based association, and our membership includes roughly over 120 different organizations. And we're hitting and representing local workforce boards. We have education and training organizations. We like to look at this triangle, is what we call it, of workforce development. So we represent industry, we have workers, and we also have the education and training organizations. And the organizations all kind of helping people find work and helping employers find people.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So let's get into, as I mentioned, we're talking about, highlighting women leaders for a series that we're doing. And we're very excited to have you as part of that series. Can you say a little bit about your own leadership journey? What does your career look like? How did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, I'm sure when you ask about how did you get in the world of workforce development, I did start almost 20 years ago at a local workforce board, really doing employer engagement and partnerships. I do not think if you would have asked me 20 years ago if I would still be in the world of workforce development, I might have said no. I think the workforce development system has a tendency to catch people. We do say, there is not a professional track. A lot of people just quote unquote land here, but there has been a certain aspect of workforce development, no matter what part of my career I've been in, that really enticed me to be like, hey, how do we help people find work? Or how do we talk to employers to overcome some of their human resource challenges? My journey started locally. I have a random one. I don't necessarily I always welcome opportunity. Let me put it that way. I'm not always hunting for different things, or I don't have set paths of, I want to be this in my life. Maybe when I was 13. But as I've gotten older, I have had different opportunities present where I worked at a local board. I've worked at the state board. I've worked at the state agency. I've worked at different agencies and dealing with education or corrections of all things. And then prior to this role, I worked in our governor's office, really diving in on policy work, which I love in terms of workforce development and education and the gamut of it. So labor law employment, I kind of left on the table when I turned my hat to the executive director here at the association. But I will say my leadership journey has been definitely one that's been rooted in having a mission to service what you're doing, and have just been open to different career opportunities along that pathway.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, we hear that so much that, people don't necessarily plan for a career in workforce. They kind of land and then love it and keep going. So can you say a little bit about, as a woman in the workforce, and not just in workforce development, but in the workforce, what challenges, if any challenges and or opportunities have you faced?
Yeah, I think because of the ebb and flow of the nature of a career path, that's not necessarily one in workforce development. I think the challenge is almost like a human nature side, that you think that you have this understanding of control around what your job entails or where you're going to go next. And then I will say some of the opportunities I've had in my career I thought were going to happen I didn't think I was going to work in like a policy office till I was like end of career, right? And so when things came about and you think you have this set path, I think one of the hardest challenges as a leader, but also just in any role, is how do you manage? And I think this is really key for today, is how do you manage this uncertainty of what's going on in your career, whether it's being responsive to whoever you're working for, or in our case, the members that we serve, but how do you maintain a presence? And so when I think about challenges of time during careers, uh, it's almost letting go of control, but knowing what you can. And so I know I can control my own performance. I know that I can control my own communication style. I know that I can control certain components of that. But there's also this stark reality at times that I think is really hard during people's careers to say, you will have alignment with people and then you will have misalignment. And so some of those challenges in those times of like disruption is when misalignments happen. As I've gotten older, I think I trust my gut a little bit more in terms of like opportunities or challenges. I think if you want to be a leader in any role, you almost have to understand what you can control and what you can't, and where you lean in during times of uncertainty. And so I think for me as a woman leader, when I think about it from the workplace, that's certainly something to think about, of like, how do I manage my own self as a personal, like as a person. I hate to say it, but I've definitely done a lot of like maybe I don't hate to say it, but I've done a lot of the personal work. Like I've done a lot of the growth. I've done a lot of the therapies. I've done a lot of the development of just not my skill set, but my knowledge base. Emotional maturity and executive style functioning should not be underestimated if you want to climb the ladder. And how do you do that has a lot to do with your personal inclinations just as much as the professional pathway that's in front of you.
I love that. What I hear you saying there, and stop me if I'm wrong, but at least a piece of that, what I hear is, I'm a Gen Xer. So all the things that we were told when we were getting
Yeah.
out of school have been upended. It was
Yeah.
like stay in a job for at least 10 years, ideally 20. It's like
Yeah.
now, if you do that, people are like, why are you not? You didn't seek, you didn't seek more challenges, right? And then all the things that they had said to us, stay in this job, it's going to be safe and you'll just be there forever. All of that has been completely upended. And what I hear you saying, at least in part, is that it's important not just to listen to advice outside, but also to do the work so that you can have this inner compass about what feels right to you. Is that anywhere in the
Yeah, I like how you call that like an inner compass. And I think sometimes you'll realize your compass is like, you know how sometimes it just circles and circles and circles and you're like, "Oh my goodness, what is going on here?" And I think sometimes that is reflective of your own personal turmoils or what's going on. I think for as much as we like to talk about work-life balance, I think there is overlap there. I think it's incredibly challenging to say I'm one person in my work life and I'm one person in my personal life. I think for me, there is a level of authenticity. You get Carrie in personal life is almost the same as Carrie in work life. Though I do have discussions with my husband around, please, can we not talk like workforce policy? Because I do this all day. We can talk about anything else. And so I think there is an inner compass for me where I find a foundation to come back to with that compass, like that center point, is believing in myself. I think there is challenges that as a woman leader that you have to anticipate. Like I have children, or for those that may not have kids, there's other like pressing priorities that you have. And so how do you do that type of filling the cup, so to speak? I heard something and I can't take credit for it, but it's your cup is overflowing. It's the overflow that you have to give to things like to work or to personal things or to family or friends or your network. And I really try really hard in terms of like my own resilience is to make sure my cup is filled. And I will be frank, I manage my schedule terribly. Like I overschedule myself, I overdemand myself, and we all hit a breaking point. And so like sometimes those simple practices of like taking a moment of pause or understanding that the cell phone might be like my worst enemy on weekends. And I think you can learn in your careers that like work will always be there. There is a sense of urgency that I think as a I'm like a middle like early 1980s, so I hit like two different generations. I think there is a sense of urgency that people have in terms of how I was conditioned growing up that may not be representative sometimes in younger generations in the workplace, but Yeah, I think you just have to have like, am I filling up my cup? Am I developing the skills that I need to develop? Am I even aware of where some of those gaps are? And those are hard things to hear, and those are hard things to take on when whether it's your employer or a coworker or someone that you manage, highlighting like these deficit points, so to speak. I think it's important that you hear those and that you have some sense of like development and assessment for it. But yeah, I think inner compass is incredibly important. And I think that's how you are authentic in the work that you do. And I think when that happens, you will get opportunities presented to you that you didn't anticipate. And I'm a firm believer that things happen just as they were meant to be. And so it doesn't make it easy. It doesn't mean that I've always managed it properly or effectively. As they say, hindsight's 2020, but I'm open to learning from my past and understanding that I have more room to grow in the future.
Well, you started to already speak to this, but I wonder if you could speak to it a little bit more. You mentioned work-life balance, the phone being not your best friend on the
Yeah.
weekend. Let's talk a little bit about and can you say a little bit about any practices that you have to be and stay resilient, and any advice you?
Yeah, some of the practices I have may be like ones that get pegged as like selfish. And I will say it's incredibly challenging for me when you say like as a woman leader, like I am a working executive, I run a nonprofit essentially, right? And then I have a home, and my home has I'm a very traditional household, right? Which not everyone looks like this, but like I have a husband and two daughters that are both elementary school. And so there's probably an over demand for my time and even my own personal choices. And so what I try to do with resiliency is to find that time for me and to recognize that it's not selfish. I think as a female, oftentimes you can get pegged as that like mother that is like, oh my God, you're doing something for you. But it comes back to that. I'm sure you've heard that airport message of you can't help other people if you can't. And same thing with the cup. Like you can't, if you give from your cup, right, you're the only person that can fill it up. People can't fill that up for you. And so for me, my practice is I know when I'm stressed because what I can say is I'm not building out time in my calendar for myself. I'm not built, what I need is like quiet time and movement. I greatly enjoy being outdoors. I like just being calm and quiet. I am a very typical person that can get up early and like want to drink that hot cup of coffee on that nice cool spring morning on my front porch and just have birds creaking. And so I think when you think about resilience practices, I think it's understanding you have to keep your cup filled. I give myself a little bit of grace when I understand like I am pulling from my cup or I am giving other people the oxygen mask when I need to take a deep breath. I think some of the resiliency factor is also acknowledging that like that you're going to need that too. Like you're going to have that trigger warning that comes off that says, "Hey, you're not taking care of yourself. You have to." And I think there is some definite conditions and cultural things as females that makes it looked down upon even as executive leaders to say, I gotta leave work at 5 o'clock because my kid has a practice that I really want to be at. And not asking for forgiveness for those type of things. Those are type of things that you need to value. And so I try to build those in. I can tell you I'm good at it sometimes and I'm not good at it other times. And I think that's all part of the process.
Well, in a moment, I want to ask you how people can learn more, but before I do that, I want to leave you with the last word about you shared some really great wisdom with us. Do you have any just general advice for, let's say, I don't want to say young men, but women really at any, mid-career, early career that aspire to leadership, or even women leaders, about what it means?
First and foremost, it's a somewhat of a be authentic. I think there's a level of like I am passionate about the work I do. While I greatly enjoy the different employers I've worked for in the past and currently and will probably in the future, I think it's the work that I find passion in. And so advice would be like find passion in what you do. I think a second advice would be like the authenticity in that is incredibly important, but it also makes you humble. I think if you're not humble to acknowledge, to say, I don't know all the answers, let me build a team of people around me or a network around me of people that can help me look at these different multifaceted layers of not just me, but like what's going on in the world. And I think you have to have some self-awareness. I think self-awareness is actually underrated. I think too many people don't acknowledge, you get stuck in these bubbles, is what I call it. And you don't realize the bubble you're in until it bursts. And then you look around and you're like, oh my God, how did that burst? And so I would say having some self-awareness that, work is hard. It's incredibly grinding, right? But sometimes you have to pause and pick your head up from it. And I think picking your head up from the grind is incredibly hard to do, but be mindful that it's necessary.
Well, thank you so much. I've been speaking with Carrie Amann. He is the executive director of the Pennsylvania Workforce Development Association. So lastly, I do want to ask you, Carrie, if people want to learn more about the Pennsylvania Workforce Association, where should we send them?
Yeah, to learn more about the Pennsylvania Workforce Association, we in Pennsylvania we call ourselves PA, we acronym everything. So it's pawork.org is the best place to find us on our website. We also have a LinkedIn profile that is PA Workforce Development Association. Realize if you're not from Pennsylvania, you might look up Pennsylvania. Don't do it. We acronym it. So PA Workforce Development Association, LinkedIn, and our website is the best place to find more information about us.
Carrie, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your words of wisdom.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you for listening to KRA's The Hub. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. To learn more about KRA Corporation, visit www.kra.com. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll be back soon with a new episode.